Imagine discovering that your greatest moral virtue, like your capacity to forgive or to be understanding, is exactly what a predator uses to target you. Because we're taught practically from birth, this very specific script about how human beings work. We're told to look for the good in everyone.
Right.
To walk a mile in someone else's shoes. To always give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, it's the standard.
Right. It's the foundation of being a quote-unquote good person. But what happens when that deeply ingrained instinct to understand and forgive becomes the very thing that puts you in an absolute danger?
Yeah, it's a terrifying paradox to confront, honestly, because we treat empathy like it's this, this universal human language, and we assume that if we just speak it clearly enough or loudly enough, anyone can understand us.
Right.
But the reality highlighted in our source material today is that there are individuals who fundamentally do not speak that language.
Well.
And worse, they recognize your fluency in empathy, and they actively use it as a weapon to dismantle you.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We are looking at a truly fascinating stack of source material today. It's a highly detailed breakdown of personality psychology, focusing on something called the dark factor.
Yes.
And we're going to explore the hidden dangers that ordinary moral people face when they cross paths with individuals who score really high in this trait.
Exactly.
We'll look at why trying to, fix them or understand them is fundamentally a trap. And most importantly, we're going to break down the precise, actionable strategies you have to use to protect yourself and basically survive the encounter.
Yeah, and to set the stage, the sources synthesize a massive amount of complex psychological data, but they really center on this concept of the D factor, or the dark factor of personality.
Yeah.
If you think of the D factor as the underlying engine, it drives what psychologists call the dark tetrad.
The dark tetrad.
Right. That's a cluster of 4 highly destructive personality traits. So you have narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and everyday sadism.
Wow. Okay.
And it's crucial to note right at the top that we aren't talking about clinical medical diagnoses today. We're not talking about, the severe personality disorders you might see in a psychiatric hospital or a true crime documentary. We are talking about subclinical traits.
Wait, let me stop you right there, because that term subclinical is really important. You mean people who just sort of fly under the radar?
Yes.
Like they aren't cartoon villains, they're just, our neighbors?
Precisely. Subclinical means they are high-functioning enough to exist perfectly well in society.
Right.
This is the everyday psychological mechanics of people who walk among us. They are your coworker, your sibling, the head of your PTA, or even your romantic partner.
Bam.
And the core of this data explores how their specific psychological framework interacts with and often preys upon highly moral, trusting people.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the first thing that really jumped out at me from the research is this idea of clashing operating systems. The psychological profile describes a healthy or a moral person and a high D factor person as essentially running on entirely different cognitive and emotional software.
That's a great way to put it. Let's look at the moral system first, like the baseline healthy operating system.
Okay.
A psychologically healthy person operates on an engine driven by connection and cooperation. They are motivated by shared joy, mutual thriving, and crucially, they have a fully integrated empathy system.
Meaning what exactly? Like they can put themselves in someone else's shoes.
Yes, but more than just intellectually understanding it, their effective empathy acts as an internal brake.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so if a healthy person does something that hurts you, they actually feel emotional pain themselves. Their brain registers guilt and discomfort.
Right, because I hurt you, so now I feel bad about it.
Exactly. Because of this internal brake, their baseline social contract is win-win. They genuinely believe that for them to succeed, you don't have to fail. They want everyone to cross the finish line.
Right, it's a positive sum game.
Yep.
But then you look at the D factor system, and it is completely inverted. Like, their engine isn't driven by connection. It's driven entirely by personal utility, domination, and what the research calls hyper self-interest.
And this is where we have to talk about decoupled empathy.
Okay.
This is perhaps the most vital distinction in the entire psychological breakdown. A high D factor person, particularly a Machiavellian or a psychopath, might possess excellent cognitive empathy.
Okay, wait, what does that mean?
That means they can look at you, they can read your facial expressions, understand your insecurities, and perfectly map out what you are feeling.
So they know exactly how their actions affect you, like they aren't blind to it.
They aren't blind to it at all. They have the map of your mind,
Yeah.
but they use that data to manipulate you because they lack the effective empathy.
Cool.
They don't feel your pain. The brake line is completely cut.
Wow.
Therefore, their social contract is strictly win-lose. It is a zero-sum game for them. They view the world as a predatory environment where you are either the hammer or the anvil.
I was trying to wrap my head around this while reading, and it really feels like a software compatibility issue.
Yeah.
It's trying to run a cooperative multiplayer game on a computer that is hardwired to play a solitary predatory survival game. Like, the code just doesn't translate.
That's spot on.
You are pressing the button to share resources or build alliance, and their system reads that input as vulnerable target acquired.
I like that analogy a lot. It explains the mechanics perfectly. If you press share, you expect reciprocity.
Right.
They see you pressing share and think, excellent, this player is freely giving away their assets, I will take them.
Jeez.
And to understand the why behind this ruthless operating system, we really have to look at what anchors these two personalities.
Okay.
So a healthy person has an authentic self-worth rooted in internal values, personal boundaries, genuine self-acceptance. They have an internal anchor holding them steady.
But the D factor's internal anchor is actually described in the text as an external vacuum. Like they don't have that self-sustaining worth inside them.
Yes, they have a void.
A void. Yeah.
And because of that void, they must continuously feed on external things to stabilize their system and prove their superiority.
And what they feed on depends on which branch of that dark tetrad they lean toward, right? Like the narcissist needs a different kind of fuel than a sadist.
Exactly. If they are heavily narcissistic, that vacuum demands constant validation, applause, status to patch up a really fragile underlying ego. They need you to admire them.
Right.
If they are Machiavellian, they feed on power, money, and control. They treat other human beings purely as chess pieces to be moved for their own advantage.
Just total instrumental.
Exactly. Now, if they lean towards psychopathy, they feed on thrill, stimulation, freedom from rules, and they are entirely indifferent to who gets hurt or what gets broken in the process. And if they possess the sadism trait, which the sources actually note is the rarest but most actively destructive,
Yeah.
they actually feed on the distress and suffering of their victims. The pain they cause is proof of their dominance.
So if these two systems are fundamentally, structurally incompatible at the base code level, what happens when the moral person tries to use their cooperative system to understand the high D factor person?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Because this brings us to what the psychological data calls the empathy gap, and quite frankly, the profound danger of goodness.
Right. This is where the dynamic becomes incredibly tragic. Psychologists refer to this as the double empathy problem.
Double empathy problem.
Yes. Because the moral person is operating with a fully integrated empathy system, they naturally possess massive blind spots when dealing with high D individuals. And the first major trap is the deeply held, almost sacred belief that everyone has a good core.
Okay, hold on. Let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Sure.
Isn't that usually true? Like when someone is lashing out, it's usually a symptom of trauma, right? The moral person assumes, oh, they're just a misunderstood, wounded soul. They had a tough childhood. If I just love them enough, they'll heal. Like, that's not a crazy assumption to make.
Yeah. No, it's not a crazy assumption for 90% of the population.
Right.
But applying it to a high D individual is a fatal error. The raw truth we see in the behavioral data is chilling, honestly. High D systems are not broken systems waiting to be healed.
Okay.
They are highly optimized systems designed for exploitation. So when a loving person tries to heal a dark personality with unconditional love and endless patience, the high D person does not experience that as a healing balm.
They don't have an epiphany and say, wow, someone finally loves me.
Never. They process that unconditional love as tactical leverage.
Oh, man.
Yeah, they see a person who will tolerate endless abuse without leaving. It is a vulnerability they can exploit. And this leads to a second massive blind spot for the moral person, which is the absolute incomprehensibility of cruelty.
Well, this part blew my mind. Because to a healthy mind, inflicting pain on someone else causes a negative chemical reaction. It causes guilt, stress, horror. So a moral mind literally cannot compute the motives of psychopathy or sadism. It just doesn't make sense to them.
Right. If a moral person is subjected to toxic behavior or sees someone else destroyed by it in the workplace, they will spend days agonizing, searching for a rational excuse. They'll say,
Yeah.
well, maybe I didn't communicate clearly. Or they must be under a lot of stress at home. Maybe they're facing a deadline.
We make excuses for them.
We do. They do this because the alternative, that someone did something cruel just for fun or because they simply did not care, is alien to their cognitive framework. They simply don't have a file folder in their brain for cruelty for amusement.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, because we are taught, practically from birth, that giving the benefit of the doubt, being forgiving, and seeking compromise are the ultimate signs of emotional maturity.
Yes.
We look for compromises. We say, well, let's look at it from their perspective. But you're saying that in this specific dynamic, emotional maturity is actually a massive vulnerability.
In this specific context, yes, absolutely. High D people view forgiveness and the benefit of the doubt as a glaring systemic weakness. If you offer forgiveness to a Machiavellian, you aren't showing grace. You are handing them a permission slip to push your boundaries even further.
Right, you're just showing them what they can get away with.
Exactly. They treat a moral person's capacity for forgiveness as an open invitation, knowing full well the moral person will blame themselves or make a dozen excuses before ever deciding to cut ties.
The sources use a phrase for this that I really loved, the projection of goodness.
Yes. Moral people rely heavily on theory of mind, which is our psychological ability to attribute mental states to others to predict what they will do.
Right, so we assume other brains work like ours.
Exactly. We project our goodness, our conscience, and our capacity for guilt onto a person who literally lacks the hardware to process those things.
And what's wild is that this blind spot goes both ways, right? The high D person has their own blind spot when looking at the moral person.
Absolutely. Just as a moral person cannot comprehend the coldness of a psychopath, a high D individual cannot compute genuine altruism. Yeah, when a high D person observes someone being selfless, say, a coworker staying late to help a junior employee without asking for credit, their internal system cannot process it as genuine.
Yeah.
They automatically assume the moral person is running a hidden scam. They think they are virtue signaling for status, or that they are just a sucker begging to be exploited.
So they literally cannot imagine doing something for nothing. So they assume you must have a secret angle, like, why is she helping him? She must be trying to steal his clients.
Precisely. They project their manipulative framework onto your innocent actions.
Wow. So because a moral person's empathy is continuously weaponized against them, trying to help or transform the high D person is just a losing game.
It is.
Let's look at why attempts at transformation usually backfire, because I think a lot of listeners will recognize this pattern. We're talking about the illusion of the fix.
This is a very harsh reality for many to accept. The data is incredibly clear here. Genuine, lasting emotional breakthroughs with high D factor individuals almost never happen.
Almost never.
Right. And to illustrate why, the psychological analysis provides a fascinating case study by looking at what happens when these individuals enter environments specifically designed to transform them. Specifically, looking at religious recovery programs or intensive group therapy.
Right. Because for a standard person struggling with addiction or bad behavior, religious transformation or deep therapy is often highly effective.
Very much so.
It swaps out the chemical substance or the bad habit for a higher level moral incentive and a supportive community. But for a high D factor person, it's a totally different story because of what the text calls the surrender paradox.
And the mechanism behind this paradox is so crucial. True transformation, whether in therapy or a spiritual program, fundamentally requires giving up the ego.
Right.
It requires submission, experiencing genuine guilt, taking accountability for the pain you've caused, and actually desiring to make amends. But the D factor system is built on advanced justification strategies that instantly neutralize guilt. If you cannot feel real remorse for how you have harmed others, the emotional catalyst for change cannot catch fire.
Because they just excuse everything they do.
Exactly. Their system naturally views absolute submission or admitting fault as an existential threat.
Wait, let me push back a little here.
Okay.
Are we saying a human brain is truly incapable of learning empathy? Like, neuroplasticity is real. People change all the time. Are they completely locked in?
It's a fair question, but we have to distinguish between the theoretical capacity of a brain to rewire itself and the actual psychological mechanism required to trigger that rewiring.
Okay.
The catalyst is guilt.
Guilt.
If their system is perfectly designed to deflect guilt, if nothing is ever their fault, if every victim, quote-unquote, deserved it, they never experience the friction required to change.
So what happens when they enter these environments of trust and forgiveness? Like if they go to rehab or join a tight-knit church, they don't actually change their nature. The research calls it chameleon adaptation.
Yeah.
They just weaponize the new environment.
That's it, exactly. They process spirituality or therapeutic language through a purely self-serving, strategic lens, and the sources break down exactly how this manifests across the different dark traits, and it is chillingly precise.
Yeah.
Take the narcissist in a recovery setting, for example.
Oh, this was fascinating. Tell us what the narcissist does.
They execute the narcissistic pivot. They shift seamlessly from being the most chaotic addict to the most devout, enlightened believer in the room.
Wow.
They use their recovery testimony to gain stage time, endless praise, and status within the community. They often claim they have a special, direct pipeline to God or a unique understanding of the therapy that no one else has.
Right. So the program just becomes a new, socially acceptable tool to elevate their ego.
Precisely.
And the Machiavellian.
Yeah.
They aren't really looking for stage time.
No, the Machiavellian executes a different play. They realize that a religious community or a therapy group operates on high levels of trust and giving people the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
So they use a newfound reformed reputation as the ultimate cover. It gives them unchecked access to vulnerable people, social capital, resources.
Wow.
They might volunteer to be the church treasurer or the group leader, executing hidden agendas behind the scenes because no one dares question the person who has turned their life around.
And perhaps most disturbingly, the sadist uses it as a weapon. They latch onto rigid religious fundamentalism,
Yeah.
or like really rigid therapeutic rules, right?
Exactly. It provides a socially sanctioned, righteous framework to mock, judge, control, and emotionally punish others. They can inflict pain under the guise of saving souls or enforcing divine rules.
That is so dark.
They get to be cruel, but now they are shielded by a cloak of righteousness.
So they aren't actually changing their operating system at all. They're just, downloading a new interface to make the malware look like a productivity app.
What's fascinating here is that they can achieve functional sobriety or stop a specific destructive behavior. But the mechanism is purely pragmatic, not spiritual.
Okay, wait.
The analysis calls it a trading of currency. A high D person might stop drinking if they hit a total system collapse, like facing prison or losing their position as CEO.
Right.
Their brain coldly calculates that being a sober church leader offers higher utility, better reputation, more money, more power. They cleanly substitute a destructive addiction for a highly structured, socially rewarded routine. But they remain just as calculating and self-centered as before, just with a much better public image.
So if empathy is a trap in this dynamic, and we literally cannot change or fix their core operating system, what do we do? Because the reality is, sometimes this person isn't a stranger you can just block on your phone.
Right.
Sometimes it's a parent, a sibling,
Yeah.
a boss you can't afford to quit on just yet. You can't just vanish into thin air.
And that reality requires one of the hardest psychological maneuvers a moral person can make. You have to pivot your entire approach. You have to switch from an emotional, cooperative operating system to a highly strategic, rigidly boundaried one.
Okay.
The goal is no longer connection. The goal is protection.
The source material actually outlines 4 specific, actionable strategies for handling a close, unavoidable relationship with a high D individual. And what I love is how practical these are. Let's talk about the first one, which is widely known in psychology circles as the gray rock method or medium chill.
Yes. The concept here is that you make yourself as uninteresting, boring, and emotionally unresponsive as a literal gray rock.
Okay.
If they try to provoke you, you don't argue, you don't defend yourself, you don't cry, you only give short, monotone answers.
Okay. I see. That's interesting.
But how does that actually work? If someone is yelling at you and you just say, okay, doesn't that just make them madder?
Initially, they might escalate to try and get a reaction, which psychologists call an extinction burst.
An extinction burst, right? But the why behind this strategy, working long-term, is rooted directly in the D factor's need to feed on an external vacuum. Remember, they require external fuel.
The void.
Exactly. The narcissist wants your awe or your outrage. The sadist wants your visible distress. The Machiavellian wants to see you flustered so they know they've successfully manipulated your perspective. Your emotional reaction is their currency.
So if you become a gray rock, you just stop printing the currency.
Precisely. You stop providing the fuel. When the emotional payoff of interacting with you drops to 0, their system naturally becomes bored. A predator doesn't want to hunt a rock.
Right.
They will eventually seek their emotional fuel elsewhere.
That makes total sense. But doing that requires a massive internal shift. which connects to the next major concept, radical acceptance. And reading this, I realized how incredibly liberating but heartbreaking this one is.
It is the most difficult step, but it is the foundation of all the others. Radical acceptance means you have to completely stop expecting empathy, apologies, or change from this person. You have to accept that they are structurally incapable of giving you the validation you deserve.
I was trying to think of an analogy for this because it's so hard to let go of hope.
It is.
Almost like, I don't know, trying to draw water from a dry well. You can lower the bucket 1,000 times, you can use a better rope, you can ask the well nicely, you can yell at the well. But if there's no water down there, you are never going to pull up a drink.
That is an excellent way to frame it. The moral person gets trapped in a devastating hope and crash cycle.
Yeah.
They think, if I just use the right words this time, if I just explain how much they hurt me one more time, surely they will understand and apologize.
Lowering the bucket one more time.
Exactly. Radical acceptance means looking at the reality of the dry well. You have to stop expecting a high D system to output genuine empathy. Once you truly accept that, you stop handing them the power to disappoint you.
And once you stop expecting them to act like a safe person, you naturally move into the third strategy, which is the information diet.
This is critical, especially when dealing with family members or coworkers. The concept of an information diet is severely restricting what they know about your internal life.
Okay.
You do not share your vulnerabilities, your financial situation, your relationship struggles with your spouse, or your big career dreams. You keep the conversation strictly to surface-level, low-stakes topics. The weather, sports, generic news.
But wait, if I'm talking to my mother and I can't tell her about my promotion or the fight I had with my best friend, isn't that just a fake relationship?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
And that is exactly what radical acceptance prepares you for. You are mourning the loss of the authentic relationship you wish you had in order to survive the one you actually have.
That is a tough pill to swallow.
It is, but it is essential because of how the Machiavellian facet operates. When you are speaking to a healthy relative, sharing a vulnerability builds intimacy and trust.
Right, if I tell my healthy friend I'm broke, they buy me dinner.
But when you share a vulnerability with a high D relative, they are not just listening empathetically, they are indexing.
Indexing? Oh.
They are gathering intelligence. They store your personal disclosures as future leverage, as ammunition for a later argument, or as a specific pressure point to exploit when they need something from you.
That's terrifying.
If you tell them you're struggling financially, they will use that to control you later. An information diet starves them of leverage. You give them nothing to use against you.
Which brings us to the final piece of the survival guide, rigid behavioral boundaries. Now, everyone talks about setting boundaries, but the research emphasizes that with a high D factor person, this requires a complete rewiring of how we usually communicate.
Because typical boundary setting relies on empathy. Usually we say, please stop speaking to me that way. It really hurts my feelings. That relies on the other person caring about your feelings.
Which they don't?
A high D person does not care. Therefore, your boundaries must be based entirely on your actions, not their feelings or their compliance.
So how does that sound in reality? Like, give me an example of a behavioral boundary versus an emotional one.
Instead of saying, you need to stop yelling at me, which gives them the control to decide whether to stop or not, you say, if you continue to yell, I am going to hang up the phone. Or, if you bring out my weight again, I'm leaving the dinner table.
You focus on what you will do.
Exactly. And the crucial detail here is execution. You must execute the action immediately, the exact moment the line is crossed, without argument, without lingering to explain yourself. If you say you will leave the room, you have to stand up and walk out the second the behavior occurs.
Even if it's Thanksgiving dinner?
Especially if it's Thanksgiving dinner. High D individuals are constantly testing fences for weaknesses, like a velociraptor tapping the glass.
Right.
If you argue or if you issue a threat but don't follow through because you don't want to make a scene, you have just taught them that your boundaries are an illusion. They learn that they just have to push a little harder to break you.
I mean, executing these strategies, the gray rocking, radical acceptance, putting them on an information diet, and holding these rigid behavioral boundaries, it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
But doing it in real time against a master manipulator who knows exactly which buttons to push, who raised you or who signs your paycheck, that requires a massive internal shift.
It takes an exceptional psychological toll. To maintain these boundaries against a high D relative or boss without losing your mind, you have to cultivate specific internal anchors. And the first and most important is an unshakable sense of your own truth.
Because they're going to gaslight you.
They are world-class at gaslighting and shifting blame. I never said that. You're being too sensitive. You're the one who is crazy.
Right.
If your self-worth depends even slightly on their approval or your need for them to validate your reality, they will completely dismantle your boundaries. You have to know your truth so deeply that their denial of it doesn't even cause a ripple in your mind.
Wow.
You don't need them to agree that they yelled. You know they yelled, and therefore you are leaving the room.
The sources also talk about something that I found incredibly difficult to swallow, which is the elimination of the need to be right.
Ah, yes.
This is so counterintuitive for a moral person who values justice and truth.
It is, but the text makes it clear that you have to let them win trivial arguments.
Wow.
Trying to prove a high D person wrong or waiting for an admission of guilt is a trap that just sucks you deeper into their game.
It's like trying to win an argument with a brick wall that insults you.
Yes, you're playing a game of ping pong where the other person makes up the rules as they go and the net is on fire.
Oh, wow.
The only way to win is to put the paddle down and walk away, letting them think they have the upper hand on a trivial issue, like whether it rained last Tuesday or who said what in a movie, preserves your precious energy for the boundaries that actually matter.
But how do you actually do that when you are boiling with anger? Like when they're lying to your face, how do you just nod and say, okay?
It requires what the research calls radical emotional detachment. You have to view their behavior through a clinical, almost anthropological lens.
Okay, so you distance yourself.
Exactly. You have to step out of the role of the wounded family member and into the role of a scientist observing a fascinating, dangerous species. When they lashed out, you cannot take it as a personal reflection of your worth. You have to see it as an automated, toxic program running in their brain.
It's just code executing.
Yes, it is completely independent of you.
So what does this all mean?
Yeah.
If you are listening to this right now and you are recognizing these exact patterns in a parent, a sibling, or a partner, the takeaway from all this data is stark, but honestly, it's incredibly empowering.
It is.
Your primary duty in this dynamic is not to save the high D factor relative. Your duty is to save yourself. True strength in this situation isn't about fighting back, arguing your case perfectly, or loving them into submission. It is about disengaging completely, protecting your data, and preserving your own reality.
It is a profound paradigm shift. You are reclaiming your psychological safety by recognizing that your empathy is a precious, finite resource, and it should only be spent on those who have the capacity to reciprocate it.
We have covered so much ground today. We explored how the empathy gap makes moral, loving people uniquely vulnerable because they project their own goodness onto predators. We saw the absolute futility of trying to fix the D factor operating system and how the surrender paradox prevents true change, even in environments meant for transformation.
Exactly.
And we looked at the real, practical empowerment found in pulling up the dry bucket, starving them of fuel, and building strict behavioral boundaries.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it forces us to look beyond the family unit.
Okay, how so?
Well, we've talked entirely about protecting yourself when this person is a close relative, someone you are bound to by blood or circumstance. But the source material notes something deeply unsettling. Modern society frequently rewards strategic calculation, Machiavellianism, and narcissism in competitive environments.
Right. We see these traits constantly elevated in corporate leadership, in finance, and politics. Like, they get promoted.
They do. So consider this. What happens when the high D individual you are dealing with isn't a family member, but the CEO of your company, or a political leader shaping your community?
Wow.
If you have to use gray rock and an information diet just to survive your workplace because our society financially rewards these dark traits, this raises an important question. Are we accidentally building an entire culture where having healthy empathy is a systemic disadvantage?
That is a chilling thought to leave on. It really makes you question the structures we operate in every day and who we are putting in charge of them. Well, stay curious out there, stay protected, and keep learning.